Here's something most people get wrong before they ever build anything. They think the goal is to accumulate cash. It is not. The goal is to accumulate control. And control, structured correctly, can be acquired with almost no money at all. That distinction is the entire foundation of what a holding company actually is and why the people who build them at scale usually did not start with a large check. They started with an understanding of how ownership works before they had much of it. So let us define the thing precisely, because the word gets used loosely. A holding company is not an operating company. It does not make the product, deliver the service, or manage the employees. It owns things. It holds equity stakes in businesses that do those things. The holding company sits above the operations, collects distributions, allocates capital, and protects assets across a legal membrane that the operating companies cannot cross. Think of it as the owner of owners, not the manager of managers. That distinction matters from day one, even when day one is a single LLC with $40 in it and a name you changed twice before filing. What it is also not is a passive investor. A mutual fund is passive. A holding company is active ownership. It makes decisions about governance, capital, and structure. It holds controlling stakes, meaning it does not just participate in upside. It determines direction. That is the asset, not the cash flows in isolation. The control over how cash flows are allocated, reinvested, or distributed. You can own 49% of something and have very little of that. You can own 31% and have all of it, depending on how the agreement is written. Governance beats percentage. Write that somewhere. Now the phase most people skip past because it is unglamorous, $0 to $100,000. This is where the holding company either gets built on a real foundation or it gets built on sand that looks like a foundation until it does not. The most common path at this stage is not acquisition with outside capital. It is skills deployed as equity. You know how to run operations. You know how to sell. You know how to build systems. A business owner who built something real over 20 years and is now 63 and tired knows none of those things about the current landscape. That gap is the deal. You bring capability, they bring the asset, the structure reflects that exchange. Sweat equity, a small earnout, a seller note that lets the purchase price live on the balance sheet of the business being acquired rather than yours. This is how the first controlling stake gets created without a war chest. Seller financing is not a workaround. It is a legitimate capital structure that aligns incentives in ways that outside debt cannot. When the seller holds a note, they want you to succeed. Their repayment depends on it. They will take your call. They will explain the customer who is difficult and the vendor relationship that holds the margins together. That knowledge transfer has dollar value that does not appear anywhere on the term sheet. You have to know to ask for it and know to structure the deal so they stay engaged long enough to give it to you. The first legal structure should be simple and clean. One entity for the holding company. Separate entities for operating businesses underneath it. A basic operating agreement that clearly defines voting rights, distribution waterfalls, what decisions require consent, and what happens if someone wants out. This does not require a $100,000 legal bill. It requires the discipline to do it correctly at the beginning instead of trying to untangle it 3 years later when the accountant tells you the IRS sees your personal checking account and the business account as the same thing because you treated them that way. Clean cap table from day one. Every share accounted for. Every equity grant documented. Every promise written down, or it did not happen. You will eventually want outside capital, a partner, a bank relationship, or a buyer. All of them will look at the cap table first. A clean cap table signals that someone competent is running this. A messy one signals the opposite, regardless of what the revenue numbers say. The early capital stack is not complicated at this stage. It is bootstrapped cash from operations, seller financing, and possibly a small SBA-style loan once the business has enough history to support one. Revenue-based structures are worth understanding here too. Instead of fixed debt service, repayment scales with revenue. For a business with lumpy income, this is not charity. It is appropriate risk allocation. You match the obligation to the reality of the cash flows. Now, the mistakes. They are predictable and they are fatal to the platform you are trying to build. The first is mixing cash flows. Personal expenses running through the business account, business expenses paid from personal funds, informal loans that never get documented. This destroys the legal separation that gives the holding structure its entire purpose. The liability protection, the tax efficiency, the clean story for any future capital raise, all of it depends on treating the entities as distinct. They are not distinct if the money moves between them without documentation. The second is sloppy accounting from the start. Not because regulators are watching, but because you are. You cannot make good capital allocation decisions with bad financial data, month-end closes. Proper categorization. Financials you can actually read and trust. This is not administrative work. This is the instrument panel. The third is unclear roles when there is more than one person involved. Who decides what? Who has authority over which category of decision? What happens when there is a disagreement? These questions answered informally feel efficient in year 1 and become catastrophic in year 3. Write it down before you need it. The fourth is legal and tax shortcuts. The entity you chose quickly, the agreement you borrowed from a template without reading, the election you did not make because it seemed complicated. These are not savings. They are cost deferred with interest. The holding company structure only delivers its advantages if the structure actually exists and is maintained correctly. That is the foundation. One clean entity, one controlling stake, one set of financials you trust, and one operating agreement that governs what happens next. Everything built above this depends on whether this layer holds. You have one business. It is generating cash. The structure is clean. The financials are readable. And at some point, usually somewhere between month 18 and year 3, a question arrives that changes the shape of everything. What do you do with the excess? You could take distributions. You could pay down the seller note faster, or you could use it to acquire the next one. That decision, made correctly, is the moment a business owner becomes a holding company builder. Made incorrectly, it is the moment one good business becomes 2 mediocre ones. The phase between 1 million and 20 million in enterprise value is where most holding companies either develop a repeatable playbook or discover they never had one. The first acquisition teaches you almost nothing transferable because every variable is new simultaneously. The second acquisition is where you learn. You have a reference point. You know what integration actually costs in time and attention. You know which systems broke when a new entity tried to run on them. You know which assumptions in the underwriting were wrong and why. The playbook gets written in the gap between what you expected and what happened. Most people do not write it down. Write it down. The platform layer is what separates a collection of businesses from an actual portfolio. Shared finance means one chart of accounts, one month-end close cadence, one CFO or fractional equivalent who can read across all entities and tell you where the cash actually is. Shared legal means one outside counsel relationship who knows the holding structure, the operating agreements, and the entity hierarchy. Shared HR means one set of hiring standards, one onboarding framework, one employee handbook that does not contradict itself across subsidiaries. These functions cost money to build correctly. They cost significantly more to build incorrectly across 4 companies simultaneously after the problem has already arrived. The platform layer is not overhead. It is what makes each subsequent add-on cheaper and safer than the one before it. That compounding effect is the entire strategic logic of the holding structure. Entity design matters more than most operators realize until it is too late. The holdco sits at the top. It owns equity in the opcos. The opcos operate independently in the eyes of the law, meaning a liability created in one does not automatically travel upward or sideways. Ring-fencing risk is not paranoia. It is architecture. A lawsuit against an operating company should not threaten the equity in the others. A lease gone wrong in one city should not encumber the cash sitting in another. The membrane between entities only holds if you maintain it, meaning separate accounts, separate books, documented intercompany transactions, and no casual movement of funds that crosses entities without a paper trail. Deal sourcing at this stage is almost never investment bankers. It is referrals from accountants who do the books for retiring owners, attorneys who handle business transitions, and conversations that happen because you are known in a specific industry as someone who closes, integrates, and does not cause chaos. The underwriting criteria should be simple enough to apply in 30 minutes and strict enough to kill most deals before they waste your time. Does the business generate consistent free cash flow? Is the owner dependency manageable or structural? Is the customer concentration acceptable? Does the margin profile hold under a realistic stress scenario? Red flags are not complicated. Revenue that cannot be verified, key man risk with no transition plan. Accounting that changes shape each time you ask a follow-up question. When something does not add up in diligence, it does not add up. The deal that requires you to assume the best case in order to work is not a deal. It is a bet wearing a spreadsheet. Management and incentives require a specific kind of discipline. The best holding company operators do not run the subsidiaries themselves. They hire or retain operators who do, then structure the incentive so those operators behave like owners. Profit sharing tied to EBITDA. Minority stakes that vest over time. Scorecards reviewed monthly that make performance visible without micromanagement. The operator should know their numbers before the holding company does. If they do not, the accountability structure is broken and a scorecard will not fix it. Accountability cannot be installed from above. It can only be confirmed there. The capital stack evolves as the portfolio matures. A single business with 3 years of clean financials can support conventional bank debt. An asset-heavy business can access asset-based lending against receivables or equipment. Earnouts let you bridge valuation gaps with sellers who believe in future performance. Seller notes remain useful because they are flexible and they keep the seller invested in your success. The discipline is to match the structure of the debt to the structure of the cash flows, not to the structure that closes the deal fastest. Cash flow funds the next acquisition only if you protect it first. Distributions before the debt is serviced, before the reserves are funded, before the next deal has a capital reserve sitting behind it, is not a sign that the portfolio is working. It is a sign that it is being consumed. Governance cadence is the mechanism that makes all of this visible before problems become crises. Monthly financial packages across every subsidiary. Quarterly calls with advisors who are not inside the organization and are not afraid to say the uncomfortable thing. Annual reviews of each company's strategic position and capital needs. Board meetings that produce decisions, not updates. The holding company is not the business. It is the system that decides what happens to the businesses. That function only works if the information it runs on is accurate, current, and reviewed by people with the standing to act on it. At $50 million in enterprise value, something shifts that no spreadsheet announces in advance. The decisions that built the portfolio stop being sufficient to manage it. The mindset that made you a good acquirer does not automatically make you a good capital allocator. And that distinction between finding deals and deciding where capital goes across a portfolio that is already generating it is a line between a holding company that plateaus and one that compounds toward 9 figures. The job title does not change. The job does. Strategy above 50 million is no longer primarily about buying businesses. It is about deciding which of the businesses you already own deserves the next dollar of capital, which one should be starved to fund the others, and which one you are holding for reasons that have more to do with history than with math. Portfolio pruning is not failure. It is discipline made visible. A business that was a good acquisition at 8 million and is now a distraction at scale is not a permanent member of the portfolio. The holding company has no obligation to sentimental geography. The capital does not care where it came from. Governance at this level is not a quarterly call and a spreadsheet. It is real boards with independent directors who have seen the inside of a deal structure before and will tell you things you do not want to hear. It is audit quality financial reporting across every subsidiary, not because a lender requires it yet, but because you cannot make capital allocation decisions on numbers you cannot fully trust. It is internal controls that catch problems before they compound, succession planning that does not depend on any one person staying healthy, and reporting standards that hold whether you are speaking to a banker, a limited partner, or a potential buyer. The professionalization of governance is not bureaucracy. It is what you are selling when you eventually sell. Risk management at scale is structural, not reactive. You do not manage leverage after it becomes a problem. You set covenant thresholds before you need them, then hold them when the acquisition gets exciting and the banker says you have room. Insurance strategy is not a renewal process. It is a conversation that happens before you close each new subsidiary about what the liability exposure is and whether the existing umbrella actually reaches it. Subsidiary containment means the ring fencing that was architecture at 20 million is compliance at 50. Separate accounts, documented intercompany flows. A liability that starts in one operating company should not have a path to the others. The membrane still only holds if you maintain it. At this size, maintaining it requires someone whose job that is. Institutional capital arrives differently than bank debt. Senior lenders at this level run covenant packages, require audited financials, and underwrite the holding company structure as much as the individual businesses. Mezzanine capital sits behind the senior and prices accordingly, typically higher cost in exchange for flexibility and less restrictive covenants. Preferred equity from family offices or private equity co-investors comes with information rights, board observer seats, and return expectations that are not negotiable after the term sheet is signed. What institutional partners will demand is not unreasonable. They want to see that the business you are asking them to finance is governed at the level they are being asked to trust. If the governance is not there, The capital either does not come or it comes with control provisions that cost more than the interest rate suggests. The operating model at scale requires capital allocation rules written down and followed when the exceptions feel compelling. Every subsidiary gets a capital budget. Performance is measured against it quarterly with no rounding for good intentions. The businesses that generate excess cash return it to the holdco. The holdco decides where it goes next. That decision should be documented, reviewed, and defensible. The instinct to reinvest in the underperformer because you believe in the turnaround is almost always more expensive than the model suggested. The capital allocation meeting where every business gets an equal hearing is not strategy. It is politics. Strategy is the meeting where the math settles the argument. Exit options at this level are not hypothetical. They are part of the portfolio design. A recapitalization lets you pull liquidity out of a business without selling it, often by refinancing with institutional debt and taking a dividend. A partial sale to a sponsor or strategic buyer lets you monetize concentration while retaining upside. An IPO pathway exists for platforms with scale, consistency, and a story institutional investors can underwrite. The question of when not to sell is as important as all of them combined. Selling the best business in the portfolio to fund the worst is not portfolio management. It is the beginning of the end of the compounding. Here is where this ends. Every level in this progression had a next system. The person at one business needed a holding structure. The person at 5 needed a platform layer. The person at 50 needed institutional governance. Wherever you are in that sequence right now, the next level is not a different version of what you have been doing. It is a different set of problems, which means a different set of tools. Identify your current level this week. Install the next system before the next deal. Subscribe if you want the deeper breakdown on specific structures, capital stacks, and the deals themselves because this was the map. The work is in the details.